Bienvenue, colleagues, welcome back after a little bit of a frosty break we're having right now, but I'm sure the temperature, we can certainly heat it up in the room here as we move forward. Of course, we're all envious of Mr. Garrison's 15 to 20, above Fahrenheit right now, or centigrade, I guess, with Celsius. But here today we have an opportunity, and of course this will be meeting number 45 of the Standing Committee on Public Safety and National Security. And our orders of the day will be to study Bill C-12, an act to amend the Corrections and Conditional Release Act. And appearing before us as witnesses today, we have the Honourable Stephen Blaney, Minister of Public Safety and Emergency Preparedness, who will be with us for the first hour. And accompanying Mr. Blaney, we also have for the duration, we have from the Department of Public Safety and Emergency Preparedness, Kathy Thompson, who is the Assistant Deputy Minister of Community Safety and Countering Crime Branch. We also have from the Correctional Service of Canada, Don Head Commissioner, and from the Parole Board of Canada, we have Harvey Chineko, the Chairperson. So, ladies and gentlemen, let us go right on to our meeting. And, of course, Minister, I presume you have an opening statement. You have the floor, sir.
Oui, Monsieur le Président.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I do have an opening statement, yet I don't have a copy for members in both official languages, but I will be pleased to make this presentation to you.
Yes, point of order, Mr. Easter.
It's my usual point of order when this minister appears, Mr. Chair. I do find it extremely unacceptable that a minister of the Crown comes before this committee and doesn't have his remarks in written form that we can follow as he goes along. It's just plain unacceptable, Minister, and we'd ask you to reconsider the next time you appear.
Well, thank you, Mr. Easter. We've certainly yes, Mrs. de Blancy, please. Point of order.
Mr. Chair, I sat in opposition for 13 years. I heard many Liberal ministers. They never had a statement. Mr. Easter is being completely disingenuous, and I'd ask him to stop that.
Thank you very much. Okay, we won't get into debate here right now. Point has been mentioned, counterpoint made. We will now go to Minister Blaney. Continue with your opening remarks, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The committee will have to review important bills over the coming months and weeks, and I would like to thank you for welcoming me again this morning with regard to a bill which seeks to get rid of drugs in federal penitentiaries.
Committee members for inviting me here today to discuss this important legislation, the Drug-Free Prisons Act. Le projet de loi à l'étude aujourd'hui vise à fournir.
Bill under study today will provide new tools to the Parole Board of Canada to ensure that inmates do not take any drugs, be it within prison or in the community, for example, when they are out on parole. Please understand, Mr. Chairman, that the objective of Canada's correctional services is rehabilitation. That is to take an inmate at the moment when the inmate enters the institution and to provide this inmate with the tools to reintegrate society in a constructive manner.
Us in our deliberations on this important bill, I am pleased to be joined by the Assistant Deputy Minister, Kathy Thompson, the Commissioner of Correctional Services Canada, Don Head, and Harvey Chineko, the Chair of the Parole Board of Canada, for which I thank for their important work on behalf of all of us to keep us safe. Comme le savent les membres du comité, la vente...
As committee members know, the sale and use of drugs in our penitentiaries is not a new problem, nor is it an easy one to solve. Yet we must recognize that there is indeed a problem, and we must take the means to understand the scope of this problem and to find out how we can get rid of the problem.
Inmates who are entering federal prisons have a history of drug or alcohol use. This means that 15 out of every 20 inmates will require some sort of substance abuse programming as part of their correctional plan. Un des plus grands défis à relever.
The greatest challenges to fix these behaviors and to reduce the number of contraband drugs is to find ways to stop the flow into jails.
Drugs, the problem still persists. Every year, our correctional officers work to remove these illegal drugs. In fiscal year 2013-14, we saw 2,406 drug-related seizures in federal prisons. The rate of seizures has been steadily increasing since our conservative government was elected. Au cours des dernières années, notre gouvernement
Over the last years, our government has invested in measures allowing Correctional Service Canada to stem the flow of drugs into our federal jails.
We allocated $122 million to help develop a tougher approach to drug interdiction in our federal prisons. Le Service correctionnel du Canada a
Correctional Services Canada has widened its program of sniffer dogs, which in fact I was able to see for myself to strengthen its ability with regard to security within establishment, and has increased the number of inmates under being monitored in communities, and is working more closely with law enforcement agencies.
Investments. We have taken strong legislative action to place a greater emphasis on offender accountability. C'est le but de la loi sur la sécurité.
The purpose of the Safe Communities Act was to bring about a correctional services plan which contains many elements, including how to address drug addictions. We want to give inmates the tools so that when they have finished serving their sentence, they have access to tools which will help them integrate society, drug-free and alcohol-free.
Established tough mandatory sentences for those caught trying to sell drugs on prison grounds. Mais il reste du travail à faire.
But there is still work to be done. The bill on drug-free prisons will provide another legislative tool to address this ongoing problem.
Ongoing effort. In 2011, our Conservative government made a commitment to Canadians to work to eradicate drugs from behind bars. We would ensure that every federal inmate will undergo drug testing at least once a year, that every federal inmate who is found to be in possession of illicit substances will face appropriate additional charges, and that any parole applicant who fails a drug test will be denied parole. Nous constatons déjà des progrès par rapport aux deux premiers points.
There already has been progress made with regard to the two first things. Correctional services have taken firm measures to help us meet our commitments to annually test each inmate.
The key detection measure available to correction staff. To this end, the CSC has increased its monthly random urinalysis testing from 5 to 8% of inmates and from 8 to 10% last April. Actually, April 2013. Cela a produit des résultats concrets en 2013.
This has produced concrete results in 2013-14. Correctional services carried out over 16,000 urinalysis tests in penitentiaries, an increase of 174% compared to the previous year.
Logical results followed. The percentage of positive tests and refusal has declined, which indicates that the availability of drugs has substantially decreased. This is a progress as a result of our government's strong action. Furthermore, the CSC is working to fulfill our second commitment. CSC is now taking the common sense step of automatically referring cases of drug possession to law enforcement for appropriate action. As well, efforts are underway to impose tougher institutional fines on inmates found guilty of disciplinary offenses. So, if you are caught with a positive test in a penitentiary, you face the consequence. Notre gouvernement se penche actuellement.
Our government is currently looking at regulatory reform, which is necessary to increase these fines. The Drug-Free Prisons Act will allow us to respect the third commitment of our 2011 platform, which is to deny parole to any inmate who fails a drug test. This makes perfect sense, Mr. Chairman, because we want to rehabilitate our inmates. If an inmate still has a drug or alcohol addiction problem, the inmate will be able to use rehab programs which are offered and free himself of addiction before being released. And to do this, we propose 2 amendments to the correctional system and the parole system, which will provide additional legislative tools to the Parole Board of Canada, represented here this morning by Mr. Seneco.
The Parole Board has the explicit authority to cancel parole after it is granted if an offender fails or refuses to take a urine test before he or she is released. Si un délinquant obtenait un résultat positif indiquant qu'il...
If a delinquent, or rather if an inmate has a positive drug result or refuses to take a drug test, Correctional Services Canada will have to inform the parole board of this fact, and the information will allow the parole board to review its decision if necessary.
The bill would clarify the parole board's authority to apply a special condition that requires offenders to abstain from using drugs and alcohol once they are released on parole. Ce pouvoir représente un autre outil important pour lutter.
This power represents another important tool to fight against the use of illicit drugs and will help end the cycle of criminality beyond the penitentiary.
By these conditions, their parole can be immediately revoked. Ces 2 changements permettront de mettre...
These 2 changes will allow us to focus more on the responsibility, the accountability of inmates, by putting the onus on them to make sure that they get better.
We promised Canadians in the last election, and we are proud to deliver. Mr. Speaker, our Conservative government has a credible plan for tackling the issue of drugs in our prison. C'est un défi complexe auquel nous faisons face.
This is a very complex challenge we are dealing with, Mr. Chairman. The presence of drugs in penitentiaries is illegal, but it's a reality, and so we have to take measures to eradicate drugs. And this is what we've said and done since being elected. We've proposed 3 measures. 2 have already been passed, and your committee this morning is going to help us pass the 3rd measure, which is part of our commitments, and which will help us limit and eradicate drugs in our prisons. So now I would be very pleased to answer your questions. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
For your dissertation this morning, and now we will go to our rounds of questioning. The first round, of course, will be for 7 minutes, and we will start off with Parliamentary Secretary Ms. James, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister Blaney, for appearing today on this important bill. In your opening remarks, you stated that approximately 15 out of 20 offenders that are admitted to federal penitentiaries require some sort of substance abuse programs. I think this ties into the very fact that many serious crimes are related to individuals that struggle with illegal drug use, with addictions of some sort, or are crimes that are connected to the illegal drug industry. So this may sound like a silly question, but do you think that Canadians would think that a government should simply turn a blind eye on illegal drug use in prisons, given the fact that in many cases these inmates are in prison related to the very same issue that we're trying to stop in this bill? I guess maybe a second part to that question is, do you think, in addition to just simply turning a blind eye, do they think that they should be able to do this without any sort of ramification?
I thank you for your question, and my first answer would be I would be delighted to tell you that there are absolutely no presence of drug in our penitentiary. But unfortunately, this is not exactly the case, and that's why we need to have the courage to tackle with this issue. And the way we can do it is first to reduce the possibility of drugs entering into our facility. And that's what our commissioner has been working at over the course of the years. Prisons are small communities, and like any community, every day hundreds of people pass in and out the facility. There are many kinds of people working it, entering to their shift. There are garbage trucks, there are foods entering, there are inmates going in and out to medical treatment. There are offenders being gradually released. They leave for a few hours, they come back. They may leave for court appearances. They have some visitors, and sometimes those visitors are may not be helpful for the rehabilitation of those inmates. So we need to adapt. We've seen even drugs entering into our facility by projectile. You know, all people can be very creative, and that's why it's a big challenge for our correctional service officer, and for this, they are faced with a big challenge. Now, the core of the problem is if you enter with a facility with an addiction problem, and you are trying to stay in that addiction, you are not toward a sound rehabilitation. And this is the first goal of the Correctional Service of Canada, is while serving the sentence, an inmate has to be given the opportunity to get back into the society and be a constructive, in a constructive manner. So that's why we need to eradicate the presence of drug. But first, we need to acknowledge there's a problem. We have an issue with the drug in our facility. That's what the Commissioner is dealing with on a daily basis. That's why we've increased the resources to limit the introduction of drug in our facility. And we've seen the results with the dogs, especially being able to detect the presence of drug on visitors, for example. So these are the kinds of measures. But one thing will always remain is that every individual has a choice to make, and we have to provide them with the tools in order so that they can, if they decide so, to be free of drug, to be able to achieve this goal and get back into society in a constructive manner.
Thank you. Individuals with serious addiction problems, whether it be illegal drugs, alcohol, and so on, have less likely of an opportunity to lead productive lives, participate in the full economy of our society. What is the likelihood of someone who is continuing to use illegal drugs, addiction problems within the jail system, what is the likelihood that when they are eventually released, if we didn't implement this type of legislation, what is the likelihood that they would actually be able to lead a successful and productive life if they were still having the same addiction problems?
Yeah. Well, wisely, inmates can use their opportunity while serving their sentence to take advantage of the resources we are providing them in terms of giving them the opportunity to get into therapy, to get free of their addiction. But obviously, and that's why we want to make sure, especially when we are granting parole, that if an individual is testing positive, we feel that this is not a condition for a successful rehabilitation. That's why we want this to be taken into account by the parole when granting the possibility of an inmate to leave the facility. And that's why we feel that it is important to offer this inmate the opportunity to get free by taking advantage of our rehabilitation program.
In your opening remarks, you had indicated that this legislation really puts the accountability back on the inmate. The onus is on them, I think were your exact words. What is in this legislation that provides the ability for the inmate to actually know that this legislation is there, that if they do fail a drug test, if they refuse a drug test, that it may actually impact their eligibility for parole? Like, will they be fully informed in order for them to make the right choices when they're within the prison system?
Absolutely, and you raise a good point. The goal of the legislation first is to provide the Correctional Service of Canada to have the tool to to be able to monitor and face this issue, but also to put the responsibility of the inmate to take his own potential consumption into account, and that it is not helping anyone in terms of getting out of prison. So that's exactly the goal we are pursuing, and of course, well, the measures will be taken to communicate this information. But the result will be that the result is fairly simple and clear. If you are free to parole and you test positive, you're not free for parole and you stay in jail. So the message is clear, and I believe this is a strong incentive for the individual to take the responsibility of their consumption, take the advantage that are provided in our facility for therapy, and the Commissioner can speak at length of what is offered to the inmates so that they can free of their drug addiction. So while serving their sentence, they can also get free of their addiction, because as I've indicated, almost 75% of inmates entering in our facility may have a drug addiction problem. And we know that a drug-related issue is an aggravating factor in terms of potential of committing crime. So that's why this bill is a step in the good direction. This is a big issue. This is not a simple one. This is an issue that all modern countries are facing in their facility, but we take the road of empowering the inmate in their own personal choice so they can get in rehabilitation, take the therapy that are offered, and also make sure that they reduce the possibility for them to get those products that are not helpful.
Thank you very much, Minister. And now we will go, Mr. Garrison, please, 7 minutes, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the Minister and officials for being here today. There's no, I think, dispute around the table about the two quite small measures that are in the bill, and in fact, we all know that both of these are already common practice of the Parole Board. But we have a very comprehensive title on the bill. The bill says it's drug-free prisons. And so from the remarks I've heard from the Minister, I guess I'd say it's a new year, but it's not a new song. And what the Minister appears to be doing is continuing to confuse the symptoms with the problem. The problem is addiction. The problem is not drugs in prison. That's a symptom of the problem we have, generally in society and in our prisons. So when the Minister talked, he talked again about punishment and individual responsibility. These are not solutions to drug addiction. People who are addicted don't respond to those same triggers that other people would respond to. And so what's missing, although it's hard, I would agree with Mr. Easter, it's hard we haven't seen the text of the Minister's statement, it's hard to see where he's talking about the actual treatment programs in the prison. We know that since 2010 we have an additional 1,000 people in Canadian prisons. We know that the Correction Service budget has been cut. We know that the Correction Service budget only spends about 3% of all its budget on programming. And so my question to the Minister, who says 75% of people come in with an addiction problem, is, are they being treated? Are 75% of the people in the prison system receiving addiction treatment? I think we know the answer, but I'd like to hear it from the Minister, since it wasn't in his presentation.
Well, I thank you for your question, and while there are some inaccuracies in your question, let me try to provide you some, shed some light on your comments. First, yes, drug addiction is a personal problem, and it is the personal responsibility for an individual to take the necessary steps to get free of addiction. Our role is to offer them the support, the help, and the tools that are needed. And in fact, we're doing so. We are investing tens of thousands of millions in our correctional facility to help inmates with the different issues. And in fact, you may be interested in knowing that for those individuals seeking a drug-related therapy, 95% of the inmates are being provided with the therapy. So yes, the Correctional Service is providing help and support to those who need it, and that's part of their rehabilitation program. And that's why we've been investing in rehabilitation, but that's why we also need to invest in reducing the possibility to have a drug entering into our facility, and to also be able to, for anyone who's caught with testing positive, to give these individuals the opportunity to get a therapy. But if we don't have this testing, if we don't test randomly the inmates like we do, we won't know we have a problem, we won't be helping the inmate, we won't be helping the society, because this individual will go back into society with a drug addiction program, and you can be sure that there are strong possibility that it will come back in our facility and will be rolling and rolling and rolling again with the same problem. That's why we are moving forward. That's why we are increasing the random testing, because the first way to get and solve a problem is to recognize you have a problem.
Well, Mr. Minister, if you say 90% of those who seek treatment are getting it, then the statistic you're leaving out here is how many are seeking treatment. If you're leaving it to them voluntarily, then obviously we have some much smaller number seeking treatment. So the problem here seems to be the lack of people seeking treatment then. And that's something that corrections has a responsibility to examine. So it's a classic kind of supply and demand. As long as you have people with serious addictions in prison, human ingenuity being what it will, they'll try to find ways to get those drugs into prison. So what percentage then have in their correction plans drug treatment, and what percentage are receiving that treatment? Not how many want treatment, but what percentage of those with these problems have it in their correction plans and are receiving that programming? And let's not talk about wait lists or may receive in the future. What percentage are receiving the treatment?
Well, as I just and I've indicated to you, of those who require the therapy, 95% are offered and are taking this therapy. So our program...
With respect, you've just said two different things. Before you said those seeking, and now you're saying those require. So which one are we dealing with here with the 95%?
Those who need a therapy, 95% they get the therapy.
And
let me give you some more numbers that are encouraging and that are indicating that we are moving forward in the right direction.
But with respect, Mr. Minister, is there a report so that you can show us, to demonstrate what you just said, that 95% of those who need therapy are getting it? Have we tabled a report here in the House? Has it been in an annual report? Because I haven't seen that figure.
Yeah, well, what I can tell you is we are offering therapy. We are offering therapy to those who need it, to those who want it, to those who are eligible for it because they have a drug-related issues, and 95% of those individuals are receiving the therapy. So the therapy is there. Now the problem is the fact that we need to make sure that those individuals are being not only offered therapy, but don't have access to drug. So,
but I'd ask you again, Mr. Minister, will you table that report with this committee?
Well, I think our commissioner is here and he can respond at length to your question. But let me just give you an example of how encouraging we got encouraging result with the drug testing. Now we are randomly testing inmates once a year in our facility. In 2013, 2014, we got 16,500 urinalysis tests that were given in penitentiary. And as you know, as we speak now, we have less inmates than that. So it means that some inmates have been tested twice during the year. Well, of those 16,000, 1,021 tested positive and 1,139 tests were refused. So it means that 6% of tests came back positive and approximately 7% were refused by inmates. It means that 87% of...
You just said 13%, but you said 95% are getting treatment. Now you've just said 13% wait. Something doesn't add up here.
No, baby, don't mix oranges and apple, my dear colleague. What I'm telling you is that 87% of the tests we conducted have indicated that those individuals, they don't need a treatment because they're drug-free, and they are 87% of the tests we've conducted. Of those who have tested positive, what I'm telling you, those who either have tested positive or could have in a drug addiction program, 95% are getting the therapy.
Time's expired, Mr. Garrison. You can certainly follow up at a later time with the Commissioner. We will now go to Mr. Norlock, please.
Thank you Excuse me. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses and the Minister for attending today. Minister, I'd like to keep things simple. We can throw percentages and numbers and a whole lot of things out there, but on my message, and I think your message, isn't to the people sitting in this room or around this table. Our message is to the men and women who formulate the population of this country, and whose expectation is that when somebody goes to prison, they do not have access to drugs. Now, in previous committees where this issue has been brought up, the opposition says, you must be dreaming if you ever hope to eradicate 100% of drugs from prison. And I think the answer is, probably not ever will there be 100%, since we're talking about percentages, a drug-free prison. But for members of Parliament and those men and women who we are very proud of in the Correctional Service who help keep us safe and provide the necessary programming to those in our prisons, that we have to keep them safe and provide them with the ability to help those who are in prison get rid of their addiction. And would you not agree with me, Minister, that one of the best ways to help a person leave their addiction behind is to have a place where they cannot obtain the very thing, whether it be drugs or alcohol, or for that matter, tobacco, to put them in a place where they don't have access to it? Wouldn't that be the best first step?
I thank you for your question, and I think we have two different approaches to the reality of drug in prison. We have our government, the Conservative government, who's saying we need to eradicate this issue, and unfortunately we've seen the opposition, the NDP, saying, well, let's give them more needles. This is not what this government is intending to do. What we want to do, if we find an individual who has a drug addiction problem in our facility, we want to give him the opportunity to go under a therapy. And Correctional Service Canada provides a range of internationally accredited substance abuse programs to offenders whose dependence on substances related to their criminal behavior. What we are offering is a helping hand for those inmates in facility so that they can get drug-free and they can actually resolve an issue that they had before entering our facility, because we've seen that 75% of the inmates who entered our facility had a drug issue-related problem. I've just indicated to our colleague that through our random testing, we found that 87% tested drug-free to our random testing. Now, for those who are testing positive, we are offering them therapy. And by participating in substance abuse programs and aftercare, offenders learn to manage their patterns of substance abusing with the ultimate goal of decreasing the chances that they will reoffend. And that's also why, with the support of that committee and the bill that is in front of you, if an offender is found, an inmate is found testing positive before parole, well, we want to empower the parole board to say to that individual, you are not in a state where you will you have chances to successfully reach the goal of your rehabilitation program, which is to be drug-free. That's why we want to give the opportunity to those inmates to stay in our facilities so that they can have access to those therapy.
Well, thank you, Minister. So you would agree with me then that one of the ways that makes people who are addicted, who for various reasons have a very difficult time controlling their addiction, that the availability of drugs is not helpful, and that this piece of legislation and our concentration on trying to keep our prisons free of drugs goes a long way to assist those who are in our correctional system be able to successfully rehabilitate and to rid themselves of this program. Would you not agree with me that that one of the in this social atmosphere that and in the modern social atmosphere in our prisons, we have, of course, the gang issue. I have in my riding one of Canada's largest prisons, and it's a medium security, and the people who work there, the wonderful men and women who help keep us safe and rehabilitate prisoners, tell me that these medium security prisons are now getting more dangerous because of the influence of gangs, because of the exterior pressure on family because of the ingenious ways in which they get drugs into prisons, in some cases, one hates to say it, but even in the diapers of the infants that come for conjugal visits or for visits with their mom or dad. So I wonder if you could comment on those modern day realities that we're faced with in our prisons today.
I thank you for your question, and I've touched earlier the challenges that our correctional service officer face when dealing with the numerous opportunities and of circulation of goods and unwanted goods in our facility. And Commissioner Head can comment further to this, but one thing is for sure is that we have to make sure that we've noticed in the past that some visitors may represent a potential of carrying unwanted substance. So we have to make sure that the correctional services have the authority to prevent those potential threats to enter into our facility and maintain a drug-free lifestyle in our prison. But if I may, Mr. Norlock, let me just share you how positive result we get with our National Substance Abuse Program. It works in our facility. The Correctional Service of Canada are devoting large effort to support inmates who enter into a rehabilitation program. And there are strong, they have very positive results when compared with offenders who do not participate in the National Substance Abuse Program. Well, they get almost 5 times more likely opportunities to be granted conditional release because they are drug-free. They get 45% less likely to return with a new offense and 63% less likely to return with a new violent offense. So what those numbers are saying is that the program that are put in place by the correctional service to help inmates to get free of drug is a way, is an investment actually, because it prevents inmates to reoffend and get back in our facility. Thank you.
And now we will go to Mr. Easter, please. 7 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister. I don't think there's any question, Minister, that of course we need to do our best to ensure that prisons are drug-free. In order to do that, we need to, same as in society, we need to reduce the market for the drugs, which is inmates using drugs. Same in society. If there's no market, then we don't have too much to worry about. I mean, I've even had people come to me, nothing we could do about it, but to see if people who were sentenced to 2 years less, parents come to me whose children sentenced to 2 years less a day, which is in the provincial system, if there's any way they could get 2 years plus, so they'd go into the federal system and maybe get some drug treatment. That's how serious the parents were. But there's 2 approaches can be taken, or maybe a combination of both. One is penalties, which this bill seems to be all about. The other is treatment for what's clearly a serious problem. And I know, Mr. Minister, you said in your remarks you were proud to deliver. Let's be honest, you haven't delivered anything other than a piece of paper that says penalties is going to be the answer. And I'm wondering, in your analysis, if either yourself or CSC can tell us in your analysis how much you think these penalties are going to cost the system in terms of longer incarceration, people not being productive in society because they're in prisons, and if you'd respond whether or not you think that money might be better spent in a treatment program which under your government you've cut back.
Well, I thank you for your question. While I'm pleased to answer, I respectfully totally disagree with your comments and question. It is not because you don't want to see a problem that there is no problem. It is not because you are not getting the tools to see the magnitude of the issue that there is no problem. That's what this government has taken. We have a French expression qui dit on prend le taureau par les cornes.
Take the bull by the horns. Which means that we have a challenge. We know that there are drugs in our penitentiaries. We recognize that inmates who are carrying out sentences in our prisons have addiction problems, and up to 75% of inmates in our facilities have addiction problems. And as I said this morning, we have now brought about measures to test inmates for drug use. We do so systematically now, and this allows us to detect these inmates which have addiction problems. And when we find them, we can offer therapy which has been proven and which can be adapted to the needs of each inmate. For instance, some inmates might have addiction problems with regard to opiates, and we can help them by providing methadone treatments. So we have these tools, and we can offer these therapies to inmates who have addiction issues. We've also seen that these therapies have positive effects because they decrease the risk of an inmate taking up drugs again, and increases their success at rehabilitating themselves and integrating society. But if there is a positive test, it works to the disadvantage of both the inmate and the community. So if there is a positive test, we keep the inmate inside, provide the inmate with more therapy, which provides, as we've seen, spectacular results.
On the need for therapies. My problem is your approach as a government seems to be, let's just increase the penalties and that'll solve the problem. I mean, if you go to the Correctional Investigators Report of 2013-14, he was critical of the government's continued refusal to develop a comprehensive program to respond to drug use in prisons. That's part of the problem. And I think on the numbers, he said, yes, he agrees with the numbers. 75% of federal inmates have a substance abuse problem. But the budget has been cut to $8.7 million, which is a decline from $11 million allocated in 2000 2008, 2009. Now, the two don't match. Is the government going to put more money? If you're going to catch people who fail the urine test, is the government putting more money into substance abuse programs within CSC so that you can cure these problems? Just having the penalty is not enough. You need the substance abuse program, and that's what the correctional investigator is saying you're short on, and we're saying you're short on. You have to do both.
Once again, et encore une fois, Monsieur le Président.
Again, Mr. Chairman, if we don't know there's a problem, it's difficult to apply a therapy. And that's the advantage with testing. It's to identify these inmates with substance abuse problems. So we have a public health program based on epidemiology and monitoring, testing, prevention and control, care, support, and education with regard to health. Nearly 95% of inmates who need therapies have access to these therapies. And I'd like to clarify one thing this morning, Mr. Chairman. Providing therapies, taking measures to eradicate drugs from prisons, but it's not an excuse to throw taxpayers' money out of the window. I'm very proud of what Correctional Services has done to bring down expenses. In fact, we have centralized some operations, which has generated savings which could be reinvested in therapies to provide treatment to addicted inmates. or the money could be invested in testing or in sniffer dogs, which allow us to detect and prevent drugs from entering prisons. Yes, our responsibility is managing taxpayers' money. We are doing this by addressing the drug problem in our prisons. By doing this, we are bringing down crime and bringing down the risk for reoffending. It's a good investment, and we will continue to do that.
Up. We will now go to Madame Lefebvre, s'il vous plaît.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the officials and to the Minister for being here at the committee this morning. We greatly appreciate it. I am pleased that we are talking about this issue today, more particularly about drugs in jail and addiction in prisons. I think all of us around the table can agree that there is a problem. We cannot ignore it in our penitentiaries across the country. We have to address this problem. And it's interesting to hear the answers given and the questions asked around this table. Inmates in our penitentiaries will one day enter our communities again, and as members of Parliament and you, Mr. Minister, as public safety, you will have to make sure that when they return, they should be role models of what a good future citizen should be. So we have to provide them with the best tools possible. When you give us the figures with regard to treatment and addiction, it really causes me to think. You talked about these positive tests and therapies which are offered to inmates who do test positive. You said 95% of inmates who are offered therapies, or 95% of these inmates are offered therapies. Is there a waiting list? You talked about 95%. Are all of them in treatment, or is there a waiting list? If there is a waiting list, how long is it? Well, the objective of the treatment, of the therapy, is to ensure that as long as an inmate is in prison, well, first of all, we identify the problem. And if the inmate wants to go into rehab, we offer that rehab. 95% of these inmates have received treatment before they were released. So we're managing the problem, and the results are there. We can say that any inmate who wants treatment can get treatment before being released on parole. Is there a waiting list to enter these programs? Well, when it comes to the operational management of these programs, perhaps Mr. Head can address that.
Rehabilitation program.
Thank you, Minister. We do have waiting lists for various programs. We prioritize the offenders' participation in the programs depending on their eligibility dates for potentially day parole, full parole, and start release. So ideally, those that have a release coming sooner than somebody else will be at the top of the waiting list or already in programs. So we target offenders that are likely to be released to go into the programs first, and those that we have for longer periods of time, we'll gauge the right time to have them placed in programs. The one thing I will mention, because it's a question that the Minister's been asked several times, is that although we do have very specific drug programs, we have in the last couple of years revamped our program suite so that at the very initial stages of admission, offenders now are partaking in what's called the Integrated Correctional Program model, and they're starting to get the primers for the programs, the prerequisite modules to those programs within the first 90 days that they come into the institution. So we're taking this issue of getting inmates to programs as soon as possible very seriously and using the new Integrated Correctional Program model in 2 of our 5 regions right now so that inmates are starting programs within the first 90 days of admission.
Suivant ça, vous excuserez, je suis un peu néophyte.
Of that, I hope you don't mind, but I don't know very much about addiction treatment programs. How long does treatment last on average for an inmate?
in terms of intensity levels. So a high intensity level program can be as long as 12 weeks, moderate intensity program 8 to 10 weeks. But in addition to that initial program, we have maintenance programs, because one of the things that we're always concerned about is that we could give an offender a program early on in their sentence while they're still incarcerated. At some point they're going to go out into the community and we'll be supervising them in some form of release out there, and we want to make sure that the learning that they've gained in those programs continues. So we'll have what we call community maintenance programs that will continue to build on the program learning that that they gained while they were inside the institution.
Ok, intéressant.
Madame Durdebay.
Oh, merci.
Thank you. Mr. Payne, 5 minutes.
Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister, for coming, and the officials as well. And Minister, it's interesting you talked about the inventive ways that people can bring drugs into the prisons. I happened to attend with the Solicitor General of Alberta the remand center in Medicine Hat, and we actually talked about it. And in fact, they had this open yard area where the inmates would go in and get some exercise and so on, and they actually ended up having to put nets over top of the yard because people were throwing those projectiles and getting the drugs into the prison. So that certainly does speak to your point on that. Also, there are other ways, and I think some of our colleagues here have talked about people's ability to find ways to get drugs into prisons. And recently, I know that one of the correctional officers has been charged. So he was implicated in trying to get drugs into the prison for some of the prisoners. So that situation is ongoing as well. And I know also, Minister, you talked about numbers in your opening remarks, and I wonder if you could sort of expand on those numbers, the drug seizures in particular, what kind of drugs and kind of amounts that we have seen coming into our facilities.
I thank you for your question, and once again we have two different vision here, and our government has been dedicated and involved at eradicating the presence of drug in our facility, and we are moving in the right direction. I've given you this number of 87% of our drug testing who have tested negative, so there were no, it doesn't mean though it's all perfect, but it certainly is a step in the right direction. But you're right to mention that there's been a seizure of drug, and I'm just moving through my notes here to find the right number. There's been seizures of drug in our facility. What I would also like to say regarding this vision is that we know the impact of drug on society. We know the impact of drug of addiction that are destroying lives, that are leading to violence and sometimes to crime. We see the liberal who wants to legalize drug and promote drug, and we know the vicious impact of marijuana on the brain of a young Canadian. We feel we have to go in the other direction and give a helping hand to those who are caught in addiction. That's why we are implementing a strategy and therapy within our own prison and facility. So we are helping individuals to get back better equipped than they were when they entered our facility. And that's why it's important, while they are in the facility, to have a zero tolerance for presence of drug. And here, in the fiscal year 2013-2014, thank you, Ms. Thompson, I have the number here. 2,406 drug-related seizures occurred in federal prisons. 838 offenders incurred a drug-related institutional charge in the same fiscal year. So this illustrates that this is a big challenge for our facility, but we don't want to put a blind eye on it. When we find someone with drug, it's the beginning of the solution for this inmate, because then we know we have a problem, then we are able to offer him therapy, and then he can embark on a true journey to rehabilitation. So that's how we are dealing with this. And with the bill in front of you today, we are providing more tools for Correctional Service Canada to help the inmate to reach their objective of rehabilitation by getting free of drug-related addiction.
I agree, Minister, that certainly the rehab is the best way to go for Sorry?
Half a minute.
Okay, real quick. You also talked about needle exchange, Minister, and that gives me a bit of a problem, as I see needles as having some other uses other than for injection of drugs. And certainly in a prison situation, I don't believe that providing needles, which potentially are weapons, to inmates would help solve anything.
I could not agree more, and we have to also to think of the safety of the correctional service officer. Thank you.
Fine, thank you. Now, Mr. Rousseau, 5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much, Mr. Minister, for giving us of your time this morning. In these types of law and order bills, one of the questions we ask ourselves is, to meet the challenges you've mentioned, have you allowed enough financial and human resources to apply these good intentions? Good intentions, of course, include rehabilitation, which is very important for us, but we also want to make sure that we test inmates, and I also want to make sure that the right diagnosis is made. Many of these inmates have mental health issues, so we need the right therapy, but also the right diagnosis. So how can you make sure we have the right human and financial resources to bring about all these measures within correctional services? Well, thank you very much for your questions, and I agree with you that addiction and substance abuse are an aggravating factor. Often, someone with mental health issues will take drugs, which can lead to an explosive cocktail, which causes a person to become severely imbalanced and to do certain very unfortunate things. Now, what I'm trying to show here is that there are programs available to inmates, and the Commissioner said that these therapies are offered to inmates to make sure that when they are eligible for parole, that they have undergone treatment to eliminate their substance abuse problems. So as soon as an inmate enters a prison, we do testing. We have a $6 million program within the federal penitentiary system. But what's really important is when an inmate needs therapy, in 95% of cases, the treatment is there. We do have the resources. And what's important for us is to make sure that we clearly find the people who have problems. And the better we are at detecting these addicted inmates, we are seizing more drugs because we've put more effort into that. This allows us to provide more treatment. The figures speak for themselves. We are making the right kind of investment by helping people get rid of their substance abuse. The risk of reoffending goes down, and the greater the chance of being successful at re-entering society. So we are putting the right resources at the right place, and this bill is going to help us to better identify inmates who have substance abuse problems. And we also want to send a clear message to inmates saying, if you want to go back into the community, well, we are going to give you the tools to help you get healthy again. So we are providing even more tools to help prevent drugs entering prisons. Well, on that point, we all know this problem exists, but often when we've heard testimony from people who enter jail, who are released, who enter again, and they say it's very easy to get drugs within the correctional system because there's a well-oiled system which makes these drugs available. And there's so many different ways of bringing drugs into jail. Even some inmates are able to make drugs within jails by using various substances which are occasionally available within jails. So these cocktails are created within the facilities themselves. How do you address that? Often, as I said, gangs regroup within jails. These gangs operate on the outside, and then they rebuild themselves on the inside. Well, thank you very much. I'd like to tell you this morning there is no problem, but unfortunately that's not the case. In 13% of cases of inmates, there are positive tests for urinalysis tests. This population, we know they have addiction problems. What I'm saying, though, is that Canada's situation is not very different from that of other countries throughout the world. All prisons, without exception, have drug problems. Again, there's not a single prison anywhere which has been able to eradicate drugs. But what we're doing here is we're taking the bull by the horns. It's a step in the right direction, and I think correctional services are doing their best. We, as elected representatives, are to give them the best tools we can, which is what we're doing this morning, and we hope we will get your support for this bill. Thank you very much, Mr. Blaney.
Finished our first hour of deliberations. The minister will be leaving now. The minister would like to thank you for your attendance here today, and we will suspend for one moment while the minister is leaving, and then we will recommence with further questions. Okay, colleagues, we will resume session now, and we will start with our rounds of questioning. For the first 7 minutes, we will start with Mr. Falk. You have the floor, sir.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about some of the comments that the minister made earlier. He did talk about some of the seizures that have been made, and just recently, again, with some updated statistics. And there's always two sides to everything. There's that two sides to the ledger. There's you know, the income and the expense side, and the supply and the demand, right? And so we'll look at the supply side a little bit. Just wondering if you could expand a little bit more on some of the trajectory that the seizures have been that you've experienced in seizures in the last 5 years.
Yes, actually, if you don't mind, I'll actually go back in time. This coming week, it'll be 37 years ago that I first started work in a penitentiary. And in those days when I started as a correctional officer, the kinds of tools that were available to us were pretty limited. It was basically our good sense, our good nose, and observation skills. And with the investments that we received over the last 5 years, we've been able to enhance our ability to detect drugs better coming into the institution. So we have seen an increase in seizures. We've seen an increase in seizures through visitors. We've seen an increase of seizures, unfortunately, being introduced by some staff members. And we've also, as the minister pointed out, we've seen an increase, which has also been intercepted by our staff, in the introduction of drugs through indirect means. So the use of drugs being tied to arrows and being shot into the yard. We've seen recently the use of drones, these UAVs, starting to hover over our fences and packages being dropped in. We've seen tennis balls that have been hollowed out and launched through grapefruit gun kinds of things, with drugs being shot into the exercise yards. We've even seen dead birds whose insides have been removed and have been launched into the yard to make it look like a bird has fallen from the sky with drugs. So we have seen an increase of seizures. I attribute that to the great work of my staff. There's always the debate is, do more seizures mean you're doing a better job, or there are more drugs in the institution? I really don't care which way the debate goes. Our job is, if drugs are getting in there, our job is to find them and stop them. So if the numbers are going up, it means my staff are finding them. And at this point in time, I feel relatively comfortable about that.
Okay, good. It was mentioned earlier that there is treatment available, rehabilitation treatment. You've had lots of experience over the years, and I'd like to get a few comments on you on what is your experience. Do inmates with substance abuse problems, do they want rehabilitation?
What we see, particularly with individuals who come into the federal system, they've gone through the provincial system a number of times before they end up coming our way. And given that they unfortunately, our provincial and territorial colleagues do not have the same suite of programs that we have available, offenders are first reluctant to become involved in programming. But one of the things that I think is worth noting, and the minister was alluding to it, we take a lot of time and effort in doing front-end assessments of offenders. We look at all kinds of socio-economic histories, and including individuals who may have been using substances, drugs, alcohol, or anything else. And we identify in that first 90-day period if an individual has a substance abuse problem, and identify the programs for them to get involved. And at that point, our staff, particularly the parole officers and even our program delivery officers, start to engage the offenders in convincing them that it's in their best interest to follow their correctional plan, to participate in those programs. As time goes on, there's always a cohort in the population who are very deeply entrenched in their criminal behavior that will not participate in programs. A lot of the security threat groups or gangs, as they're commonly referred to, will resist that. But a lot of inmates, as time goes on, see the benefit of participating in programs. They see the opportunities it provides to them in terms of moving to lesser security within the system. They see the opportunities that are available to them in terms of other employment opportunities within the penitentiaries, and they see the opportunities that are available for them in terms of conditional release, such as day parole or full parole.
Yeah. The minister mentioned that this bill that's before us that we're discussing creates an incentive for positive behavior and an incentive for inmates to remain substance-free. And I project myself into their positions, and I think I would agree with that. I think this is an excellent bill to create an incentive that would allow me, if I were in that situation, to actually be eligible for parole, to get day parole sooner, to get early parole perhaps. I think it's a great incentive for an inmate to look at and say, boy, if I can remain drug-free, alcohol-free, it's worth it to me because I get to see my family or my friends that much sooner. Do you think that's a good incentive?
I think there's some there's always the debate of around incentives, disincentives, and what works or what doesn't work. What I do know is that when I look over the last 5 years in terms of the kinds of measures that we put in place, coupled with the treatment programs, that particularly offenders that are going out into the community who have conditions to abstain from the use of substances, the number of individuals who are violating that condition is reducing. So offenders, once they're out in the community, see the advantages of being out there. They don't want to come back to my big houses. Right. They want to stay out. So we are seeing a reduction. We about 5 years ago, it was around 4 to 5% of offenders that were out on day parole, full parole, were being revoked for violating their abstinence clause. Last year, that was down to 2.8%. Wow. So a combination of the approaches that we're using, the detection methods we're using, the treatment programs that we're offering, and the maintenance programs are driving those numbers down. We still have a lot of work to do, but it's moving in the right direction.
Okay. Time over, Mr. Falk. We will now go to Mr. Garrison, please. 7 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the officials for staying and sharing your time with us. I want to start with Mr. Sinico and just talk about what's actually in this bill and make sure that we're on the right track here, because what I see in the bill is putting into law explicitly what is already parole board practice, and I want to know whether Mr. Sinico sees that as what's happening in this bill.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Before I start, I'd just like to remind the elected officials regarding the purpose of conditional release itself, and that is to contribute to the maintenance of a just, peaceful, and safe society by means of decisions on the timing and conditions of release that will best facilitate the rehabilitation of offenders and their reintegration into the community as law-abiding citizens. I think the paramount consideration in all board decisions is the protection of the public. And so this bill will amend the CCRA to specifically stipulate that CSC will advise the board prior to an offender's release that the offender has tested positive in a urine analysis or has refused or failed to provide a urine sample. Now, that has been in practice for some time. However, now it is the law, or it will be the law, and of course then that law has to be taken into consideration, just as Section 100 is regarding the purpose and principles of conditional release.
Thank you very much. I want to turn to Mr. Head because without a written statement from the minister, some of the statistics that he presented seem to be quite spectacular. And so I guess I'm looking for some confirmation of those. One of the things he said, by implication, is that when people enter the system, 75% need drug treatment, and now only 13% are failing. That would give a success rate of almost 90% for your 8 to 10 week programs. That would be a spectacular success rate. I wonder if you have any documentation of that you could table with this committee, or whether there's some misunderstanding that's going on there.
Just if you don't mind, Mr. Chair, I'll just try to clarify some of those numbers, because the minister's comments were in the right zone. I just want to make sure that the context was clear. I'll just talk about the urinalysis testing first. So when the minister was talking about the testing that we do, and we on a monthly basis random test in the institutions 10% of the population. Every month. In addition, we have the ability to do tests if we believe somebody is involved in drug activity or taking in a toxin in the body, and we do the same in the community. So the stat around the 87% is that of all the tests that we do in a given year, 87% of them were negative tests, which meant that there's leaves 13%. Just to clarify that 13%, half of that 13% are individuals who have refused to provide a sample, and the other half is individuals who have tested positive. So we treat internally individuals who refuse to provide a sample as a positive, being a positive test. So that means 13% on average in a year test positive. In terms of the program numbers that the minister was talking about, the 70% number, which he briefly mentioned, it talks about the number of offenders who receive what we call a nationally recognized correctional program prior to their first parole eligibility date. So 70% of offenders complete at least one nationally recognized program before their parole eligibility date. The 95% number that the minister had mentioned is that 95% of offenders have completed at least one nationally recognized program before their warrant expires, so before their sentence is entirely up. So I hope, Mr. Chair, that clarifies at least those numbers. There may be subsequent questions, but I just want to clarify those numbers.
And so when the 95% might not include a drug treatment program. It's any nationally recognized program.
It could be any nationally recognized program. What will happen, as I mentioned earlier, is every offender who comes through our door right at the time of admission has a correctional plan. And that correctional plan, based on a number of evidence-based assessment tools, will determine what programs the offender needs to address, both in the institution and in the community. If they have a substance abuse problem, we have several tools that help us identify that. That will be identified in their correctional program. Now, with in terms of my earlier intervention, when I mentioned the integrated correctional program model that we're implemented in 2 of the 5 regions now, and will be implemented in the other 3 in the coming year, we start those program teachings and learnings within the first 90 days now, as opposed to an offender who could have waited up to 6 to 9 months before getting into their program and starting any program learning. So we have now started to gear ourselves to provide offenders that training, that teaching. And it includes the very basic elements that are included in our national substance abuse program.
So with the integrated correctional programming, do we have any evaluation yet of its success rate when it comes to dealing with addiction problems? Because before we had a much more specific program for addictions, which was very successful. So do you have those evaluations at this point? And could you table them with the committee, please?
Yes, we have an early evaluation just in terms of its general implementation. Over the next 2 years, we'll have a more detailed evaluation as to its overall effectiveness and efficacy as it relates to various program or correctional planning models modules. So over the next 2 years, those research reports will validate, hopefully validate what we're seeing in the early stages.
And I guess my specific question was, can the early evaluation be tabled with the committee?
We can definitely share that, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Fine, thank you very much, Mr. Garrison. And we will now go to Mr. Blancy, please.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for appearing. We appreciate you, Mr. Head, for the leadership you show in Canadian society. We know this is a very difficult area, and we just want you to know that we're appreciative of the leadership that you show. You mentioned that 95% of offenders who require treatment through their correctional program receive it by their warrant expiry date, and I'm wondering if you could just provide this committee with some information about the kind of programs that are available.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for that question. We offer a variety of evidence-based programs. A lot of our programs actually have formed the basis for many other jurisdictions around the world for their correctional programming models that they put in place. The work that we've done around substance abuse programming has been a model for over 15 years. Violence prevention programming is another specific area that we spend a lot of time on. Cognitive behavioral programming is sort of the basis for a lot of our the various programs that we offer, and this is to help individuals look at situations, look at options, and to make better choices in life. So cognitive behavioral programs are part of our suite. We also have programs that are specific to Aboriginal offenders and to women offenders. As a matter of fact, with Aboriginal offenders, we have an Aboriginal substance abuse program, just keeping with the theme of the discussion today, that builds on the evidence-based substance abuse program that we've had in place for a number of years, but builds in the cultural and spiritual components that keep Aboriginal offenders interested in participating in the program. We also offer education, which is part of our programming suite, and we also offer employment skills development for offenders. So there's quite a variety of programs that we offer that target those factors that evidence has shown us that lead people into criminal behavior.
Thank you, and appreciate that. Mr. Senenko, I'm just wondering about your opinion of the tools that are in this bill to allow the parole board to apply to either prevent parole for people who have failed their drug tests. Are you satisfied that this is going to be helpful to the parole board to have this new tool?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The new information that will be provided with the legislation will trigger a review by the board. And so, as is currently the case when any new information regarding an offender is provided to the Parole Board of Canada prior to an offender's release, which we obtain from CSC. So the board would assess whether the criteria for granting parole is met. We make in the area of 27,000 decisions. Approximately 85 board members make about 27,000 decisions every year on about reviewing 19,672 cases. In addition to that, the use of the special condition to abstain from drugs and alcohol was used in 2013-14, 15,683 occasions, which ties in with, again, with the large number of offenders in the institutions that have come into the institution or had a drug or alcohol criminogenic factor in committing the criminal offenses prior to being institutionalized, prior to being convicted. So this is, I think it is an important legislation. It touches on the fact of the majority of offenders, as the minister mentioned, 75%. in the institutions. So as we move forward, the opportunities for rehabilitation are in the institutions. They're also noted in the correctional plan, which the offender is responsible for working with CSC and developing to prepare themselves for their release back into the community. So as they prepare to come before the parole board, they're preparing themselves. And we take note of all the programming that they've taken in the institution, which would include alcohol and drugs prevention programs and preparing themselves. Obviously, if they haven't, obviously if they tested positive, those are taken into consideration.
Are there any other jurisdictions that you're aware of that have put this kind of provision in place?
Not that I'm aware of. But I can check and get that information back to you if there's other jurisdictions that we work with closely.
Puts more responsibility back on the offender to really to take ownership or to take charge of their corrections plan, and then there's I guess you could say accountability at the end of the day.
Well, I think that's part of earning parole is working themselves towards bettering themselves, the remorse behind the criminal act that they may have committed and the victimization they may have caused to someone. I think that's all extremely important as they move forward through their time in an institution.
What percentage, you mentioned some numbers, but roughly what percentage of parolees would have the condition that they refrain from alcohol and drugs?
As I mentioned, of the 27,000 decisions that we make each year, 15,683 decisions included that special condition of do not consume, purchase, or possess alcohol.
So over half.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay,
Mr.
thank you.
Valencia, and we will now go to Mr. Easter. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for appearing. Start with the parole board first. Under C12, I don't believe, and I could be wrong on this, that the should an offender fail a urine test or fail to take it, that it's absolute that the board would cancel the parole. Is that true or is it not? I guess my question, put it this way, does the board itself have any discretion over the offender's parole if they fail the urine test or fail to take it? Is any discretion left with the board, or is the legislation absolute that there'll be their parole will be canceled?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The legislation, as it states, the board shall cancel the parole if in its opinion.
That's right.
However, I can say that if there's a concern for the protection of society, and again, this section is going to come into play within that 5-day period where, roughly a 5-day period, where he has been granted parole. He's now been tested, and it's tested positive prior to him being released from the institution, or he refused to be tested. That's where the board has to take that into consideration. Now, it says we are an independent administrative tribunal. Each board member makes decisions based on their assessment of all relevant information. And if they have concerns regarding the purpose of conditional release, which is ensuring the protection of society, they take that into account and they make and write their decision based on the information.
Then what you're telling me is, regardless of this decision, this legislation will be a factor in your decision, but the discretion is still left up to the board.
That's right.
Okay, thank you. So it's just not quite as absolute as the minister led us to believe. Turning then to, there's a lot of confusion, Mr. Head, around the numbers that the minister was talking about this morning. What percentage of the prison population is currently in drug treatment? Can you give us those numbers?
It varies because of the new approach we're taking with the integrated correctional program model. Before, we used to be able to just count everybody that was in the substance abuse program, but with the introduction of the integrated correctional program model in 2 regions where they start their initial program primers right at the time of the admission, those numbers now get confused. What I was explaining earlier, and I'll just again maybe if you don't mind just talk about the integrated correctional program model. It's a new approach that we're taking to get offenders enrolled in their programs as early as possible in their sentence. We start delivering what are called the primers, if we looked at the substance abuse program, the first several modules of the substance abuse program, the cognitive skills program, and the anger management program are the same modules in all of those programs. We are now starting to deliver those early modules right at the time of admission, so within the first 90 days. So for the last 2 years, the offenders who are coming into or being admitted in the Pacific region, the Atlantic region, right now are starting those program primers within the first 90 days.
Get into the substance, as everyone agrees on the number that 75% of the people coming into the prison system have an addiction, whether it's alcohol or drugs or whatever. But going to, and I don't disagree at all with that early intervention, anger management, and the rest of the programming, but getting to the drug addiction issues, which seems to be the big one. If we listen to the correctional investigator, they'll claim the numbers went down from 11 million 5 years ago to 8.7 million now. Is that all the story or just part of the story?
Just and thank you for that question, for the opportunity to clarify. It is actually part of the story. If you go back and look at the amount of money that we were spending just on substance abuse programming back in 2009, we were spending about $11.7 million. Now, with the approach with the integrated correctional program model, combined with the substance abuse programs that we're still offering in the other 3 regions, we're spending just shy of $23 million. So because of the approach with the integrated correctional program model hitting every offender when they come through the door, we're actually spending more time, energy, and money in delivering programs than we were 5 years ago.
And it could be, I'm not sure, it could be a number of problems combined, I'm sure, anger management and addiction, et cetera, et cetera. So it's 23 million then in total. So coming back to the numbers the minister raised, he said there was a 95% success rate of people who take programming. Can you expand on that a little more? Like the 95% success rate on programming, is that just substance abuse? And what percentage success rate would that be in terms of the prison population?
So just to clarify again, the number 95% actually refers to the number of offenders that complete at least one nationally recognized correctional program prior to warrant expiry date. So 95% of offenders before their entire sentence is up, both the institutional and community part, 95% of them have completed at least one nationally recognized program in relation to their correctional plan. Now, many of those offenders will complete 2 or 3 during their length of sentence. As you remember from your days, individuals that have longer sentences have more opportunities to complete more programs than somebody that's doing a two-year sentence.
Very much, Mr. Easter. We're all done now. Maintenant, Mr. Rousseau pour 5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'll be asking in French, of course.
One of my concerns is what mechanism is there between the two services, the Parole Board and Correctional Services Canada, with regard to communication, updates, status updates on rehab programs and testing. How does that mechanism work to make sure that each individual is constantly followed up on, and also to ensure that public safety is not imperiled when someone is released based on a false analysis? So how do the two services talk to each other?
Question. There are several ways in which that occurs. So we'll talk about individuals who are coming forward for conditional release to begin with. During that process, there's a significant exchange of information between the Correctional Service of Canada and the Parole Board of Canada. As well, that same information that we share between the two services is also shared with the offender, so the offender understands the basis for decision-making going forward. We also have a requirement that if there is new information that comes forward for certain kinds of situations, there's mechanisms where that information is brought to the attention of the chair of the parole board. For example, if we're talking about detention cases, if new information comes up within specific time frames, I actually write and obligated under the law to write directly to the chair to bring that kind of information forward to them. In terms of progress going forward, once a decision is made and a release occurs, the dialogue of the ongoing monitoring is really one by exception. It's probably the best way to describe it. So if a case is being managed well, the offender is not getting into trouble, is not violating their conditions, there's really no ongoing discussion or dialogue with the parole board. Their expectation is very clearly they've set out the conditions for success for that offender. Our job is to ensure the offender abides by those conditions and does not get in trouble. When they do get in trouble, then we have an obligation to bring that to the attention to the parole board for them to make a subsequent determination if they want to revoke the parole. And maybe I'll defer to the chair to talk about that process.
The issue that's extremely important here is to ensure that the offender has all the information that the board members get in making a decision. There's no secret, there's secret papers that aren't made available to the offender. The offender has all the information that the board member has, which is provided by CSC, and then the board members review the file, make their determination. The board, in the last 2 years, though, the Parole Board of Canada has seen some of the best parole outcomes in more than a decade and a half, more than 15 years. 99% of federal day parole periods and almost 97% of federal full parole periods were successfully completed by offenders without reoffending in 2013-14. Those are very, very good rates. So really what this tells, and then in addition, more than 99% of the parole periods, both day and full, were successfully completed without a violent offense occurring. So this is up to their WED. So the board has invested heavily in board member training over the last 5 years. As the chair, when I came here, we determined that we needed to develop a stronger risk assessment regime, and we developed a number of standardized tools to support high-quality decision-making for its board members right across the country. And so I think you can see some of these positive results that are occurring. The ones that have worked to be released back into the community as law-abiding citizens are. Those that haven't made it are being denied and are still in our institutions. working on their next opportunity for a parole hearing.
Sorry, if I could just add very quickly, the combination of the risk assessment approach that the parole board uses and the risk-based supervision approach that our staff apply in the community is that combination of those two is what's providing those public safety results for Canadians.
So, thank you very much now. And now, Mr. Payne, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to the witnesses again for being here. It's important that we get this information. Mr. Head, you did talk about the total dollars, some 20-some-odd million dollars in terms of the programming, as combined programming. Could you just review that again for me?
Yes, just to clarify, that's not my total program budget. That's just in relation to if we're talking about the opportunities to address substance abuse issues. So currently, I'm spending right now about $8.9 million on specifically substance abuse programming, and with our new integrated correctional programming module, which delivers those primer portions of the programs to all offenders coming in now admitted, I'm spending $14 million there. So the combination of the two is approximately $23 million that are targeting issues that we would target through the normal substance abuse programming activities.
Okay, so some of the programming that you've done, I think you indicated earlier in some of your comments that, in fact, some of those are newer programs, and also, I'm afraid I'm going to say world class, but I'm not sure that that is correct.
I'll accept that comment.
Okay. It is. Okay, well, then I'm glad to hear that it is world class, and certainly if you could sort of give us a bit of an update when some of these programs came into effect and how you've seen them instituted and the results from those.
Yes, I think it's worth mentioning that several of the programs, particularly the work around cognitive behavioral skills development, substance abuse programming, the anger management, violence prevention programs, have been around now in our service for well over 15 plus years. And in relation to the substance abuse program, its early infancy was almost 20 years ago. And what we've seen, as the minister pointed out in the statistics that he shared, that offenders that complete these programs are 4.5 to 5 times more likely to receive conditional release. They're about 45 to 50% less likely to commit an offense while they're out under supervision, and about 65% less likely to commit a violent offense while they're out in the community. These kind of success rates in terms of correctional programs are unheard of in relation to a lot of the smaller programs that you hear in some jurisdictions. Our substance abuse programming, our anger management programming, our cognitive behavioral based programming has been sought after by many international correctional jurisdictions, and they have implemented it in their countries as part of their public safety approach. So we see the impact in terms of public safety, in terms of less likely commission of offenses while they're out there. We see it in terms of individuals reaching their warrant expiry without being revoked by the parole board. So the research that has been done over the years continues to validate the efficiency and the effectiveness of these programs.
Okay, I just want to sort of review in terms of the timing of having the inmate having had drug testing just prior to potential parole, and so if you could sort of say what that timing would be, so that in fact that the parole board would have that information, obviously, along with the inmate.
No, and thanks for that question. As the bill stands, there is no requirement for us to do a urinalysis test immediately prior to our release. All it requires us to do is that if there is a drug test that occurs, either through random sampling in the institution or because we've had reason to believe that the individual is involved in drug activity, if a test occurs before the release, then we would be obligated to share that information. We would have done that anyway, but the fact that it's in law now makes it absolutely clear there is no question that it has to be done. But there is no requirement for us to administer from the time the decision is made until the release. There is no automatic requirement for us to do a urinalysis test unless it meets the current legal definition in order to administer one.
Okay.
Time's up, Mr. Payne. I'm so sorry, sir, but we will now go to Madame Duray-Lefebvre.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to come back to a question for Mr. Sinaiko. There's been a lot of talk of percentages, people who are in treatment in prison, but when they're out on parole, but still in treatment, I don't know if people will fall back into drug addiction. How do you find out through your analysis, or are there programs which inmates can take when they're out on parole? I'm assuming that they are still in rehab or getting some kind of therapy once they're out again. What does it look like?
Chair, the Corrections Services of Canada provides a supervision of the offender. If there was an issue in relation to a breach of a condition of that of abstaining from drugs and or alcohol, if there was a breach of the condition, the parole officer, who is the supervisor of the offender, would make a note of it. They can cancel the parole at that point in time. The offender would could go back into the institution. Then the board has to convene a board to make a decision whether to cancel the termination or the suspensions, or cancel the suspension of that offender's parole that was granted, or they can revoke the decision on that original decision. So depending on the seriousness of the offense, if it was a minor breach, the board can make the decision to cancel the suspension, and the offender remains in the community, obviously under close supervision by the CSC official.
Does it often happen, for instance, when someone is out on parole and then they test positive, do they go back to prison? Is this something you see a lot?
No, as I mentioned in the statistics that I provided, those are where the parole was successfully completed. So it doesn't happen a lot. I don't have the exact numbers. However, I can tell you that we're at, I think the programming regime that CSC has changed within the past 4 or 5 years has done a tremendous job in relation to providing offenders with treatment and with programs, preparing them to be back law-abiding citizens back into the community. I think the regimes that we've taken at the board in relation to assessing risk truly can determine whether the individual will. Now, not in every case. We don't have the use of a crystal ball. However, from the risk assessment and the tools and the scientific tools that we use, you can see the results that we've seen over the past 15 years, where we truly have seen some remarkable successes, especially in these last 2 years.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Mr. Head, in CSC's budget, about 3% is spent on programs within your facilities. Can you tell me what the percentage is of that 3% which ends up in drug addiction treatment programs. Do you have numbers about that?
Like I say, the problem with trying to break out the numbers specifically to drugs now is with the implementation of the integrated correctional program model, which has early components of the program. It's hard to give you that precise percentage, but I can just very quickly give you a breakdown of the substance abuse programming in relation to the overall programs. So in terms of our overall programming initiative, we spend, as I mentioned, just over almost $9 million in substance abuse program. We spend about $9.8 million on violence prevention program. We spend $2.2 million on family violence programming. We spend $4.5 million on sex offender programming. We spend $7 million on maintenance programming. We spend approximately $60 million on social programs. And as I mentioned, we spend $14 million on integrated correctional program model. And in addition to that, we spend approximately $25 million on education, and then about $42 million on core can employment skills, employability activities. So.
We're well over time on this one, so thank you, Madam Director. We now go to Mr. Nerlock, 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and once again, thank you to the witnesses for appearing. And when my friend, Mr. Payne, asked you a question, is it sort of world class? Perhaps I can help him out. Having been on this committee since 2006, I can say that when we were a minority government, the opposition required us, when we were traveling around Canada and to Great Britain and Norway, that we go to Norway because they were considered to be the country with the best programming. And I can recall one of the last questions I asked one of the officials who might be in the same capacity as you are, Mr. Head. They said 60% of their programming came from Canada. So indeed, we have world class. And I noticed, Mr. Seneko, and you can confirm this if you don't mind, that you said because of the programming that CSC is providing and some of the requirements that you, the parole board, have made on the parolees, that I think you said somewhere in the vicinity of 98% they're completing their parole successfully. Am I pretty close to being correct there?
97%.
97%, wow. So we have to worry and flagellate ourselves over 3%, and that's what you'll hear the opposition. The government never spends enough. There's not enough of this, there's not enough of that. But, and I agree with them, by the way, that when you have 3% of people who are recidivists, we need to do something about the 3%. But we can't discard the 97%. And so I want to thank Mr. Head and Mr. Seneko and Ms. Thompson for your work. But it's not done. And that's what we as legislators are trying to do. You've just responded, Mr. Seneko, that is this piece of legislation going to force the parole board to mandatorily do something? You said, no, we still have discretionary powers. Basically, that all this legislation does is put into a regulatory regime that which is already being done. And I really don't see a problem there. I don't think the average Canadian does. But Mr. Head, would you agree with me that the average Canadian, the mums and dads and young folks out there, have a hard time getting their head around the fact that someone who's placed in a prison and all the things we do to make sure that society is kept safe, that the men and women who work there are kept safe, and that there's programming, they just say, how in the heck do people get drugs into prison? And thank you for explaining to the folks out there One of the things that we have in our society, and I'm very glad we live in a free democratic society, is even if you are in prison, you have certain rights. And having spoken to some of the men and women who work in our prison saying, how are they getting drugs in? And you left out one that really bothered me for a while, and then you get your head around it and you think, is in the diapers sometimes of babies. Have you heard of that, Mr. Head, as a way of getting drugs in?
Yeah, not only have I heard of it, when I worked the front line a number of years ago, I actually made a seizure with the drugs in diapers, as well as drugs in body cavities of children. So when these kind of situations occur, they're desperate acts by desperate people for whatever reasons, and unfortunately, not only are they ruining their lives, they're ruining their children's lives, they're ruining everybody in their families' lives. One of the things that we do now is that when a new visitor is coming to the institution, is we show them, they have to watch a video about the issue of being approached to bring drugs in the institutions and the consequences that occur when they're caught. So it is disheartening. It's a challenge. It's illegal, and we need to continue to do everything that we can to prevent it. Because if I don't prevent it, I don't have a safe environment in my institutions. If I don't have a safe environment in my institutions, my staff won't do their job. If my staff don't do their job, the offenders will not participate in the programs that they need in order to get back out into the community as law-abiding citizens. So for me, this is a continuum. I need to have strong interdiction so that I can provide the right kind of opportunities, the right kind of programs, the right kind of interventions, so ultimately they return as law-abiding citizens and Canadians are safe.
Thank you.
Time is up, and Mr. Garrison, you'll have the opportunity to back clean up today for another 2 or 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I think we've had a very interesting discussion, and I think when we strip away the rhetoric that came with the title of this bill, the Drug-Free Prisons Act, and get down to what's actually in it, I was very happy to hear Mr. Senayko confirm what I believe to be the case, which is that this bill is actually putting into legislation things that are already happening. So we're left with the rather extravagant claims by the minister, which on examination seem to break down somewhat differently than they were in the initial presentation. So I know over the break I actually missed Mr. Norlock saying, would you not agree that? It's my favorite phrasing of questions in the committee that we will certainly miss when he retires from this parliament, although someone else is sure to pick it up. Thank you. I am on the subject. So my temptation is to ask Mr. Senayko, would he not agree that those who are released on parole do much better than those who are released at the end of their sentence in terms of warrant expiry? That we have much higher success rates, that we do have between Corrections Canada and the Parole Board a very successful system that when it's focused on rehabilitation.
I would agree. We've seen from our interviews of offenders who are remorseful for the actions that they committed against victims, that they are now trying to remain off of drugs and alcohol, that they are following the correctional plan that they worked on with their supervisor in the institution, CSC's institution, that they're taking responsibility for the criminal actions that they were convicted for. They're back in the community as law-abiding citizens, still under supervision, but however going on beyond the warrant expiry, and becoming productive members of society.
Great. Well, I think I can say on behalf of everyone in the committee that we certainly appreciate the work that all the corrections staff and the Parole Board do in trying to make Canada a safer place. So thanks again for appearing.
Fine. Thank you very much, Mr. Garrison. And certainly on behalf of the committee, I'd like to thank Mr. Senayko, Mrs. Thompson, Mr. Head. Thank you for your testimony here before the committee, and I thank my colleagues for certainly their contributions in making Canada a little safer place. Thank you very much. We'll deliberate further. Adjourned.